Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to rank. Welcome back to the ESPN Esports VALORANT Power Ranking Show. I am your host, Tyler Feel on Fire Erzberger, the most degenerate ranker in the business, here to rank as always. This week, it's Europe's second time we're going to do Europe. It's the debut for my European expert in the Valorant scene. We know her. We love her. She is a part of the ESPN Esports crew. It is Emily Rand, the analytical point of view. That you're Miss Analytics.
Yeah.
You're an analytics person.
I like my spreadsheets.
You like spreadsheets.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know how to use Excel. You do.
Wow, are you actually serious?
Yeah, I don't know how to use Excel at all.
Oh my God.
Very embarrassing.
That is an interesting fact I did not know about you until today.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm, as we'll go through, I'm sad about a lot of things regarding the state of European Valorant, which actually has nothing to do with the level of talent that they have, which is probably the most frustrating part, because I feel like people equate a lot of problems that they might see in the scene or the fact that we don't have as many big org signings with, if you're not paying attention to the scene, people are just like, they must not have the talent. And I would strongly disagree with that. And it's actually something that's actively tilted me for the past month or so. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, a lot of news in Europe. We're going to get to a lot of it. A new super team might be forming under Mr. Carlos Ocelot himself. G2's owner might be seeing ghosts very soon. He's conquered Europe, and an old foe might be rising from the ashes to laugh at him once more. We will get into that when we get into our power rankings. But yes, it's a very interesting time in Europe, where I feel like right now in North America, we are starting to see an established form. We're seeing the Sentinels, we're seeing TSM, Immortals, Cloud9. We're seeing all these big orgs kind of settle in. We're finally starting to see kind of a I don't want to say a league format because we're seeing these same 10, 12 orgs kind of be in every tournament in this quasi-league format where we're now seeing every other week or every week these tournaments pop up, and we were expecting these teams going at it every week. Rivalries are being born. And in Europe, I feel like it's a much more transitional period. I feel like right now to maybe the start of 2020 or 2021, we are in a transitional period where I think more orgs will be coming in, kind of establishing the market. But I think for the foreseeable future, for the end of the year, we'll see maybe one or two more orgs pop up. But I think by the time, when we first get our first offline tournaments coming in middle of 2021, hopefully, I think we will see, 6 to 10 strong European organizations with Valorant teams, because I think the viewership is there in the Western region to justify it. But right now, this is very much a transitional period for every team in Europe except one.
Yeah, if they were like a traditional sports team, it'd be like they're going through like a roster build, like a team building. Yeah, rebuild year. Which is, again, I think the most frustrating thing is that I feel like a lot of people take away no European orgs are interested, which actually is not true if you talk to people. A lot of it has to do with monetary concerns and also just generally how they've been building their rosters. And then the other thing, where people are like, we don't have enough talent in Europe. And that is unequivocally, wow, I'm also having problems speaking today. Yeah. Not true. And additionally, on top of that, I feel like I still believe in Europe as a region that can rise to be the best in Valorant, actually, just based on the fact that most European countries are more of a PC culture, and additionally, they have such a strong history in other FPS games like Counter-Strike. So, yeah.
So let's get to the meat and potatoes of our show. It's the ESPN Valorant Power Ranking Show. These will be our power rankings. Every week, me and my guests, we go to the board, we go to the lab, make our top 10 of the specific region we'll be discussing, and we unveil it to you. Me and Emily have not talked about our rankings. I do not know what's on her list. She does not know what's on mine. Hopefully it's going to be a bit different. Sometimes, as we saw on our last European show, me and Ryan Central from HitScan, we had very similar rankings. It seemed like the establishment was kind of isolated. It was kind of forming. But now we've seen some disbandment. We've seen the rise of some teams like Punk. So I think our rankings are not going to be as similar as me and Ryan, especially with, seeing how we might not see eye to eye when it comes to some disbanding teams. Because to kick us off, number five on my ranking from 5 to 1, I have a team that isn't actively. They're dead. They're kind of dead, not really dead, kind of not really. We have Fabrikin, the all-Swedish lineup, where currently they still have 2 players kind of on the roster, kind of, as you said, a rebuilding of them. But I kind of am looking at this as a whole, right? I'm not saying that currently the 2-player Fabrikin is the 5th best team in Europe, but I think the result that Fabrikin have built up throughout their extensive tournaments, even though they didn't go far in their final, last dance swan song at the mandatory cup. Terrible format.
Best single limb,
random maps.
Game.
Yeah. Not the greatest swan song where it's like, okay, guys, we're just gonna give you a random map. You have a single match elimination. Did not work out for them. Obviously, a few of those players are looking for maybe I won't say greener pastures, but greener money pastures, definitely, for some of these players. And we'll talk about that a bit soon. But for me, Fabrikin was a team, and we talked about this with me and Ryan a few weeks ago, is that this team had so much potential to be one of the best in Europe. A friend of mine, Sue Collins, wrote for GG Recon today that Fabrikin was actually in talk with Fnatic to actually be picked up by them. And because of COVID, because of some it's not seeing perfectly eye to eye. They didn't want an entirely Swedish roster. They wanted to have scouts and analysts first on, they wanted to build from the ground up. They wanted analysts to kind of pick out the team and scout the team and pick players individually instead of just picking up a 5-stack. So those talks dissolved, which led to the disbandment of Fabrikin, and Fnatic saying that they will get into the Valorant. They are coming, but like Vitality and other European organizations that have promised that they are looking and they're scouting, but because of the global pandemic currently going on and Europe's general lack of rushing into things when it comes to esports, they probably will not be fielding a team until late 2020 or early 2021 when maybe we'll see her seeing the first offline tournaments. But for me, Fabrikin at the end, I think they will always be remembered as this team that kind of try to revolutionize the Sageless comp. We're seeing a lot more Sageless pay. Even when more healers come into the game and Sage kind of probably goes out of the meta, in and out of the meta, I'm sure she will always find her way back into her resurrection, heal, and wall. But I do think Fabrikin's lasting legacy will be that Sageless comp and just how they were kind of the first team to really say, we don't need Sage, we can without her, and they did quite well with that.
Yeah, I love Fabrikin. They were kind of at the forefront of what I considered a lot of innovation from EU teams. And I am sad that they are no longer in existence in their prior form, and I'm sad that they couldn't get Fnatic or someone else to pick them up as a 5-stack, which is part of my issue of what's going on in Europe right now, but I'm not going to take up more of your time because I'm going to rant about that later. So,
who's your number 5 then?
My number 5, so this is where it's probably going to get super controversial already because I definitely cheated later in my top 5. Here's where I have my boys, my personal favorite.
Oh man, really?
Yeah. So
wow.
I think they obviously did not do well in this tournament. I blame a lot of the format on that, honestly. I still think that for those that don't know, it's Fish123/Team Liquid. I think this of all of the teams in my top 5, save one other, I believe in this roster the most to overcome their issues and be able to contend with G2 actually. So even though I'm putting them 5, this in addition to one other lineup that I've yet to mention, is the roster I think has the most potential because you already see them really trying to figure out how do we want to use Scream, right? Is the big.
Where does he go?
Where does he go? How does he fit on this team? We're taking him off of this more slower style with the Breach. We're putting him on Reyna. How did that work? Maybe not as well as they would have wanted to. I've been not shy in our Valorant show about my love of this team. I think they can do a lot better. I just think in their current form right now, they're really still trying to figure out how they want to play. And they still are not reeling from the loss of Artis, but they're still really trying to figure out their identity without him on the team, right? And this is where I actually think I want to see Fish123 really step up and be like, maybe, okay, if we don't want to have a primary opper, what do we do in that case? Like, how do we make the most of the fact that we have an insane team of riflers? And that requires like a lot more tweaking of their play style, but I would love to see them come up with a Fabrican-esque solution, because Fabrican's thing was born out of the fact that their Sage player left, right? So they were like, okay, well, what do we do now? We don't have someone who we want to play Sage at like that high of a level. Let's go Sageless comps. We think we can play without a Sage. I can see Fish123/Team Liquid doing something very similar where they're like, we still don't have a primary opper since we lost Artis. What are we going to do now? We're really going to lean on our rifle prowess. And I want to see that. Like, I want to see that out of this team. I don't think they're there yet, but I do want to say that in the 5th spot with a caveat, and yes, no one's going to listen to this. They're just going to look at the ranking and be like, Emily, you're expletive crazy. Is that I think they can improve so much from where they're at. I just think right now they're really still trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah, I think when you kind of break down the European region as a whole, I think in NA, if Fish123/Team Liquid were in NA and they did not have that primary operator player, I think they would have a bit more trouble, just because North America is so beholden to the operator, where every team has that primary operator player. Even Sentinels, where a team, you don't really think of them as, a team hard carried by an operator player. Shazam is still one of the best operator players in North America, and Sinatra can pick it up, Sick can pick up it. Oh, in North America, much more beholden to the operator play, where I think in Europe, we've seen even Fabrican himself being much more rifle-based party pairs with the Vandals. It's less focused around the operator, except for G2, who everyone on that team can pick up the operator and just go crazy with it, which is very unlucky for every other team in the competition. Let's go to number 4 for me. We're already split on that. I have Team Liquid a bit more higher than you, but they're not on my number 4 spot. Number 4 for me, this is tough. From 4 to 2 for me is very difficult. I feel like any of these teams can kind of switch around. For me, number 4 is Ninjas and Pajamas.
Oh, okay.
And in terms of results, I think they should be a bit higher. They should be 3rd or 2nd, but for some reason, I'm left feeling unfulfilled. I like the roster. I don't love it. Where I do, like, when I talk about Team Liquid, right, where Team Liquid, I can see that high potential where, like, yes, if everything comes together, Scream can be that ace player. He's shown it. They just need to find that correct position for him, the right agent, the right setup, find that operator player that they can lean on in tough situations. And for Ninja Pajamas, I like the team. I don't love them. I think Lucker is probably one of the better operator players in Europe, even though the operator player, like I said, isn't utterly dominant in Europe. I think Kriye and Fearoth are both excellent players. Hip is, again, the most maligned player on the team. I think he is kind of the star player.
So much time dunking on Hip. It's very funny.
I mean, to be fair, he does play. I mean, he was the only player in the world playing Arena. Not playing Arena this time. He was on, different agents. He was playing the Sage mostly in the tournament. He went back to the Sage. Lucker is playing the Jet. Kind of Europe kind of finally going towards the North America / G2 ways of playing the game, where every team has to have that, Jet with the operator, kind of standard on most maps nowadays. But for me, I like Ninjas Pajamas. I don't love them yet. I still need that breakthrough win. It feels like they can beat everyone below them. They lost to Bonk in this tournament. They lost to Fish123 in the last Ignition Series tournament. As part of Prodigy, they made the finals of the first Ignition Series tournament, the Vitality Open. Got beat pretty soundly by G2. So the core of the lineup has gotten good results. The thing is, Hip's never going to amaze you with the scoreline, but he continually wins. Doesn't matter what game it is. He's not the most outstanding player stats-wise, but he gets victories. And this team maybe should be maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on them. Maybe this is more a bit of a personal bias of just the eye test for me, not seeing them as good as they should be. But I think they're a very good team. I'm just waiting for them to break out, to have that kind of statement win to shut me up. And that's just for me personally. They're my number 4, but they could easily be number 3 or number 2 on a good day. I think the number 2 to 4 spot for Europe right now is very topsy-turvy.
So I agree on two things. One, I agree that you can shuffle anything like for me within my 2 through 5 in those 4 spots. But I also had NIP in 4th. And the reason was very similar. You put it in maybe a slightly harsher light than I would have, but like I haven't seen anything really interesting from this team that's like caught my attention. Like they're obviously good. They beat, like they typically go into an event and we expect them to beat who we expect them to beat, and they lose to kind of who we expect them to lose. But when I'm comparing them to Fish 123, even though currently I did rank Fish 123 lower because I think the more recent performance from NIP was a lot more stable. I don't see that same like really high ceiling. I don't see that same potential. I don't see something like, I know, yes, they were trialing the Reyna for a while. And we've discussed our feelings on that on the Valorant show as well, which is kind of like, well, he plays it and they keep winning, so we can't really malign it too much, but it's not necessarily what I would consider a strong pick for them either, despite the fact that they kept locking it in for HIP. So I don't really feel strongly about them at all. Like I don't look at them like a Fish 123 TL and I'm like, I want you guys to succeed because I know the talent's there and I really am rooting for you. Not that I'm rooting against NIP, but like I just haven't seen anything from them that's really captured my attention, that's caught my interest, that's told me that yes, they could maybe contend for the top of Europe. So they're at the like, we're very good standard. And that's why I put them 4th.
Yeah, very much a team where it's like, we like you. You're definitely a perennial contender to make semifinals of every tournament you get to. Probably will make a final here and there, but we need that statement win. Like they've taken series off of Fish 123, but they got eliminated by Fish 123. They took a game off of G2, but they couldn't close the door on G2. They could have made the finals of this tournament, but lost to Bonk. And speaking of Bonk, they are my number 3 team this week in the European power rankings. I don't want to say I have high hopes for Bonk. I just want to believe in Bonk, right?
I love them.
It's like we lost Fabrikin, right? We lost our lovable Swedish amateur team, with that pop-off entry player with Zipan. You want to have those feelings come back to you. And then you have Bonk, another all-Swedish team coming, and they not only, made the finals of the mandatory cup, losing to G2, and giving them a good shot, even though it was a 3-0. It was not a lot of teams have really bloodied G2 at all through these first 3 Ignition Series tournaments. They've dropped maps that really have not been forced to go up a year or two. But Bonk did, play pretty well. They beat Ninjas Pajamas, who were my number 4 team. They also made the finals of the Absolute Masters tournament, which was a very long tournament that finally came to a conclusion last week. They lost to the Opportunists, another interesting amateur team with some pretty interesting players like Brams and Takis, who they are, on my top 10. We'll talk about them a bit later at the bottom half. But Bonk I like them. Maybe I'm a bit too. I'm looking at my rankings now. Maybe I'm a bit too eager to put them above Ninjas and Pajamas. Maybe because of the shiny feeling, right? Where it's Ninjas and Pajamas, bit of old hat by now, made a few semifinals. This is really Bonk's real first showing of like we can go deep into a tournament, a major tournament like the Ignition Series tournament. But I like them a lot. I really like Yassine, who plays that Jet, who plays that Raze, who's that similar Zypan player, who's kind of the ace of the team. Obviously, we need to see more before we can kind of anoint them as a Party Parrots or a Fabrican level amateur team that, big orgs like Fnatic, Mad Lions, Vitality should be looking at. But I really like a lot of their players. I think they have a good future ahead of them. And right now in this transitional period of Europe where there's only one team I truly believe in the long haul, there's one team I know that will be, when 2021 hits, there's only one roster of 5 players that I'm sure will be together. That is G2. Everyone else might either swap out players, get picked up by new orgs, and for Bonk, I don't know if these 5 players are going to be together, get picked up by a big org, but I am very sure that some of these players at least are going to get picked up by a big org later on because I see a lot of potential in them.
Yeah. So here's where mine goes off the rails because as you know, whenever I do rankings, I always like bring in something on like a technicality. So my number 3 actually is the rumored FunPlus Phoenix roster, which is also why I have back here Rip Fabricant, Sageless Kings, and Rip Party Parrots, because this lineup, for those that didn't see the report, it was reported by Halo of Thoughts that FunPlus Phoenix is going to be picking up a team to enter the European Valorant scene. And it's basically a combination of Fabricant and Party Parrots. So Meadow, Shadow, Zipan, Angel, and Xiao. This on paper is an insane lineup. And I think obviously we're going to have communication questions, which is something that is really important to play Valorant in general. You need to be communicating at all times with your teammates. But on paper, I absolutely love this lineup. I want them to come out and immediately compete, and I think they can, partially because to make this roster, you took out 2 of the best teams. So you're already eliminating your own competition by, cannibalizing them. But then additionally, I think like based on what we saw those teams do, this is a really interesting mix of the individuals on both. The one thing, there are a few points of concern. I think when we've seen these amateur teams come up that we've talked about in Europe, and that we're going to continue to talk about outside of G2, which was, brought together, is that a lot of these teams, when we see them do well, they're fixing a problem, right? Like we lost our Sage player. We're going to play Sageless comps. We lost our operator. We're trying to figure out how to do the best we can with like all of our riflers, because our riflers are insane. I feel like a lot of the innovation that I've seen out of European teams that I really like I am totally down with like scrappy teams that are trying to figure out solutions because they have a glaring weakness. I actually love teams like that. They are my Achilles heel for rooting for them. So when we see up and coming European teams, I feel like they always have a thing like that, right? Like they have some sort of thing that they have these weaknesses and they're really well aware of it, so they're trying to cover it up with other strengths. This team on paper does not need that, right? Because you're taking the best performing players from both end, you're kind of sticking them onto a team, and you're like, okay, we have everything here. Yep. Like we have our Sage player, we have our operator, we have everything. Like, let's go.
Cypher, best Cypher in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're all set. We have everything. And as we know historically in esports, that doesn't always work out. So I'm really excited about this lineup. That's why I had to put them high. I just really wanted to talk about them. I also wanted to give a small eulogy to my former European darlings over here in Party Parrots and Fabricant. And again, as to how these rosters are being formed and picked and scouted, I'm going to rant about that later in terms of how European orgs are saying we're not going to pick up stacks of 5. We want to create like our own lineup, because I think sometimes the reasoning behind that is a little faulty. But I'm really excited about this lineup. I wanted to give them a shout out. 3rd is probably high. This is where everyone on Twitter is going to look at my ranking and they're going to be like,
who is that? Why the FPX there?
What the actual expletive are you talking about?
Isn't FPX Chinese? Why is a Chinese team in the European rankings? I have no
idea what she's talking about. I love this roster on paper, though. So if this ends up being FPX's roster, I think they can come out and immediately, if not like contend with G2, at the very least be a solid, strong number 2, as opposed to what we've been talking about, which is kind of this mass of good, not great European teams underneath.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit about FPX. Just on, if I was ranking this lineup on potential alone of these 5 players on paper, I'd rank them second. I'd actually put them second. I just think Meadow, best cyber player in Europe, arguably the world. Shadow, one of the better breach players in the scene today. You have the 2 probably the two best aces on amateur teams outside of Artis and Mixwell. We have Artis, Mixwell, Scream. Those are the three big aces. Who are the other two in the top five? You have Saipan and Xiao. Now you're putting Saipan and Xiao together. Saipan can play the Rays. Xiao can be on his Soba. And then you bring in Angel, who is he is probably one of the most experienced players in all of Valorant. Being a in-game leader of Hellraisers and Counter-Strike forever. The only problem I want to see is the communication issues, right? I believe Xiao's English is quite good. My thing is Angel's, what he brings to the team mostly is that shot calling, that leadership. So if he can communicate well with the rest of these, Swedish players, this team has everything in it to be a top team in Europe. And I can actually talk a little bit about this myself, where when Halo Thoughts did break the story, I was like, oh, because I had also talked to some sources close to the situation, and they were telling me, like, yeah, Saipan and Xiao are, teaming up a super team of sorts to throne G2. This team is designed to take down Carlos. and I was asking who, like what's the org? Like, give me any hints, any breadcrumbs, give me on a good little, trail hunt for me. And all I was told was the team is a big org, but you will never expect them. So when I saw that Phoenix logo, I was like, perfect. It makes total sense. It's a Chinese team that wants to become global in FPX. Mm-hmm. They've already shown that they want to become a global team similar to T1 and Gen G, where they don't want to just be a Chinese organization. They have a lot of money, as shown by, paying Khan $2 million in the offseason. They have a lot of money with them. So I'm sure this Valorant team, even if it costs a lot in terms of Valorant money, in the grand scheme of things, isn't probably going to break the bank for them. And it's kind of beautiful, isn't it? It's kind of poetic, where Carlos is on Twitter, he's bashing everyone. He's not even bashing European teams. That's the funniest thing about Europe right now.
He already left behind Europe, and he's throwing shade at NA.
Yeah, he's throwing shade at NA, and who would have guessed? The one team, the super team built to defeat Carlos, is the team that 3-0'd his League of Legends team at the World Championship last year at the other Riot Esport in front of millions of people watching worldwide. There could not be a better storyline than Team Liquid, FPX, and G2. The three teams that were in the MSI and World Finals last year of the biggest tournaments in League of Legends, all contending for the title of Best in Europe, which is, I can't wait to see the antics of FPX and G2. And my number two team, making a quick segue, Team Liquid, Fish123. Okay. We don't have to talk a lot about them. We already talked about them with you. I think the main thing is finding that position for Scream. Scream is obviously their ace player. We've seen him transform from a stage player to a breach player to a Reyna player, back to the breach, now back to the Reyna. Now it's kind of finding where he fits the best. And as long as they can find that right position for their ace player to make him comfortable, he's not an operator player, so we won't probably see him on Jet. But if you can have him on, a duelist, put him on a duelist, have him on Reyna, have him on Raze, have him on, a high impact agent like that, and you can find, Eccles or Link to be a solid but not overwhelming operator player, this team can win championships. They can contend with G2. As you said, like, this team has a lot of potential. They're very young. That's the thing about them. These aren't players who had a long career in CSGO outside of Scream. Where Scream is already that established player. He's already at his peak. He is the ace of the team. The rest of the players have a lot to grow into. So that's the exciting thing about Fish123 / Team Liquid, is that I don't think we've seen the best of them yet. So number two for me, I still think I kind of looked at the mandatory cup results and kind of threw them out, saying, I'm not gonna judge you too harshly for losing in this stupid format. So I'm gonna keep them at number two for one more time. If the next Ignition Series tournament they have similar results, even if it's in a busted format, I'll have to move them down. But for right now, with me not looking at the FPX lineup, I didn't think of them as FPX yet. I still have Team Liquid as number two.
That's fair. I mean, I already said my thoughts on Fish123 TL, and that I think they have the most room to grow. So I completely agree with that. Looking at the mandatory cup, I definitely see the difference in our approach to power rankings, because I definitely heavily weighted, and whenever I do power rankings just across the board, I heavily rate the most recent performance. Yeah. Regardless. which is also why like a lot of these things are looking to the future, aka I cheated by putting the Olympics roster.
The super team.
So with that being said, it shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone who has been listening to me for the past like half hour in that my number 2 team is actually Bonk. I was really impressed with their performance at this tournament. This isn't the first time that we've seen them like unexpectedly do well, because we saw them in We Play as well. But I do think that this is where they really started to show that they can be a threat, despite the fact that obviously G2 still beat them fairly handily in the finals. I do think they did manage to push them in a few places. I really liked watching Aaron, their Cypher player. I'm mentioning him only because you hadn't mentioned him previously when you were talking about Bonk, who is previously known as, I'm going to forget his name, but he just changed it for this tournament, I believe. Anyway, this is kind of the new European up-and-coming team that we've seen this happen time and time again in Europe, where we have a team, they're all from the same country, they make a 5-stack, they're really good, they communicate well, and then they inevitably fall to the wood chipper that is all of these teams trying to pick apart these 5-stacks rather than picking them up. Again, I have a rant coming about that later, but I don't want to talk too much about Bonk because you already touched upon them. But suffice it to say, I'm not like strongly in disagreement with any of your rankings. I think the main difference between the two of us is that I did heavily rate the Mandatory Cup despite my problems with it, especially the format. And that's also one of the reasons. But Bonk, come on, like they're a team that is tailor-made for me to like them, right? Like a young,
scrappy.
They're making their way up. Like I love teams like this. So I'm rooting for Bonk. I really enjoyed watching you guys this past weekend, and that's why they're second.
And before we get off Bonk and go to our number 1, very, very, high tension to see who our number 1 team is. I don't want, gonna have to build the anticipation a bit more until we get to number 1. But I want to shout out Safe from Bonk, the most flexible man in Valorant. Let me run down the player, the agents he's played in professional tournaments per VLR.gg, one of the better sites when it comes to statistics right now in Valorant. He's played Sage, Viper, the final Viper player. He is one of the final players in the entire world who will play Viper even before her buffs.
Figure out, yeah.
So Sage, Viper, Phoenix, Sova, Reyna, Breach, Raze, Brimstone, Cypher, Jet. He has played. Is that every single agent? No, he's played 10 of the 11 agents in the game professionally. I just want to give a shout out for that. I'm not going to say all those were the most serious of games, but I do want to give him a shout out for being the most flexible man of all of Valorant Pro Esports right now.
I was going to say, I think you just like him because he actually brought out Phoenix against G2, and you've been wanting Europe to pick up Phoenix a lot more.
But it is fun for a player who can play so many agents.
Yes, he's like been proven to be very flexible. Even like, so we'll put some of those picks aside. Like even in their final against G2, he played 3 separate agents, and that is obviously like a match they're taking very seriously, right? So his flexibility is
jack of all trades.
One of their strongest points.
All right, and let's get to it. Number 1, our producer Daniel, just flip up the G2 logos for both of us. Let's just talk about G2. Congratulations, Carlos. Your ghost's coming very soon, my friend. Right now, they are untouchable. They haven't even been pushed to kind of a second gear, I would say. Right now,
same comp and
every same comp. It's very similar to when I'm playing with my friend and colleague Thomas, who is higher ranked than all of us on his Smurf account, where he basically just says, I'm going to pick Jet, and I'm going to run into site, and I'm going to do Jet things, and you guys just follow my lead. And it feels very similar to how G2 play, where they are so much better mechanically than a lot of these teams, where they don't have to really have these hard executes or have these grand plans of strategy with utility, where a lot of times it's very much, I aim better than you, I am better than you, we are better than you as a collective, all 5 of us are better operator players than you, all 5 of us are better riflers than you, game over. And Artis, another gold medal, 11 for 11, the self-proclaimed king of Valorant, once at it again. And really, right now, there is holes in this G2 lineup, when it comes to how sloppy they can be at times, how a bit over aggressive, how much sometimes they rely too heavily on their mechanical play. But I also don't want to talk about too much because they haven't been pushed to actually play at a higher level. I am sure if they were pushed or knocked down or were upset by a team, Mixwell is one of the smarter players in the Valorant scene. I have no worries that they would go to the workshop, even without a coach, and build game plans to combat teams who can push them to the next level. But right now, no team in Europe can actually push them to that level. Hence, why Carlos does not trash talk any of the other European teams. There's no reason to. He's trash talking the NA teams.
Yeah.
So that's my piece on G2. They're untouchable right now in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, no one. I think so. We talked about this on our Valorant show. Neither of us expected G2 to lose the mandatory cup. I haven't talked to anyone who expected G2 to lose the mandatory cup. I think the fact that they were not even pushed to use a different composition on any map in the finals is pretty telling of how far ahead they are, which is why you and I were hinting at it the entire time, despite the fact that I cheated by putting FPX on my power rankings. I'm still saying okay, 2 through 5 are whatever. And as we move into 6 through 10, my 6 through 10 are completely negligible. I don't have any there's only one team I really want to shout out of those teams. Is that they got their roster together first. They scouted who they wanted. Despite a few there was a little bit of pushback, I think, on a few of their players. I feel like Pith received a lot of heavy criticism from some of the
Yes, he has been the most maligned player on the team.
Yeah, so I think this past weekend he really showed up, to be honest. And that's kind of he was the player that I really wanted to shout out from the Mandatory Cup, because I feel like people have been really critical of his performances. And this past weekend, I think he really started to show why G2 really wanted him for this roster. At the same time, who is the most frustrating thing for me about G2, as you can probably tell, if you haven't seen me on our Valorant show, if you haven't seen me talk about why I love Chinese League of Legends teams, despite the fact that they do dumb things, is that I really love seeing teams find a really awesome play style. I love watching teams solve problems, like I said before. And G2 does not have to solve any problems. Yeah. They don't have to do anything right now. And that's a really frustrating state to be for this team, because to your point, they have the talent on this roster to also be remarkably smart if pushed. Yeah. I want to see this team pushed. I want to see someone push them to the point where they do have to adapt, where they do have to come up with different compositions, where they do have to come up with different strategies. And right now they're not receiving that in Europe. And it's really frustrating, because if we're not able to have cross-regional tournaments, what typically happens if no one is there to push you is that you end up stagnating. And I do not want this to happen to this G2 roster, because they are just insanely stacked, and I want to see them continue to evolve and improve. So that leads into our next part of our discussion about Europe.
Yeah. First off, congratulations to David P. finally being signed full-time with G2. Yep. Very well warranted. One of the best battle stages in the world. It's either him or Sick for the best stage in the world currently. Props to him. Amazing player. Deserved to get signed. Happened he should have been signed far sooner, but thankfully they finally picked him up. He's on the roster. This 5 stack is going to be going together for a long, long time. Can't wait to see them at an international event next year. But let's break down our bottom 5 in our top 10 very quickly. For me, I had the Hungarian boys, BZT, and Need More DM in number 6. Number 7, Opportunist. I this is a team I kind of highlight. They won the Absolute Master Tournament. This team is very similar to Bunk, where I think we're going to see a lot more of them in the next coming of tournaments with all the transitioning going on. Watch out for the opportunists. Brams is a killer. He's a very, very good player. I like this team. Keep an eye on them. Number 8, Party Parrots, RIP. Have fun on your FPX as you rise from a parrot to a phoenix. Not a bad upgrade for Shao and Angel. And we have number 9, BBL Esports from Turkey. And number 10, No Pinky, the Lithuanian stack with back at the front. So that's my top 6. My only thought from this is watch opportunists. They're really good. And also need more DM. Yeah. Always on the rise. Very good team. Always on the edge of a top 5 for me. I think those are the 2 teams to really watch from my bottom 5 is opportunists and need more DM.
So for me, mine is when I first submitted this, I actually, knowing how the back half of the show works, I was like, I told our producer, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something really fun and I'm only going to submit a top 5 and then I'm going to rant about Europe. And he's like, you can't do that. You need me. So I do want to shout need more DM though. I really like this lineup. They've shown a few flashes of really interesting play. I think people should have their eyes on them. I also rated No Pinky higher than you did, and shout outs to them because, again, I think they have potential to be really good. I also put Dream Chaser and those guys in just because they overperformed, in my opinion, at the Mandatory Cup. And then finally, I have a question mark, which is next up-and-coming European team. And so here's where I want to get into my rant about what is happening in Europe right now, because what is happening is that you... by nature of what happens in Europe, because you have different countries, people who speak different languages and live in different areas, you have people forming 5 stacks. And a lot of these 5 stacks are ending up being really good. They're doing really creative things. They're doing really interesting things together. And then they try to go out and be like, someone please give us a chance as a 5 stack. Someone please pick us up. And no European team wants to pick up a 5 stack. And while I understand, like, we want to scout our own talent. Like, I even brought up the FPX lineup previously, right? In a third, like, top 3 position as, like, this is stacked. I feel like, and in that discussion I mentioned this, I feel like there's always something lost when that happens, right? Because you have these young, hungry, creative teams that already work really well together. And we've seen North American teams where people at NA orgs come to their org, like a star player will go to their org and be like, I really want to play with like this stack of players, or like TSM where they're like, we want to get picked up as a 5 stack of CS players, like former CS players.
Team MVs as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and European orgs, for whatever reason that's going on behind the scenes, I've heard some things, do not want to do that. Like, they were like, we want to scout everything ourselves. We want to pick apart these rosters. And what it's creating is this weird, like, lull period that is exacerbated by the fact that European tournaments have sucked. Like, oh, God, like, the format for some of these has been terrible. And, like, I feel like something is always happening, right? Like, you have a thing with the qualifiers, like you had with WePlay. You have a thing with single elim, single map. We're going to randomly pick the map instead of veto process. Like, why are we doing this? Like, you have so much talent in this region, and I know I'm yelling, but I'm mad. I love Europe so much, and I don't want players to stop playing Valorant because of this. I don't want them to get super frustrated and be like, this sucks. We can't get our 5 stack picked up. No one's going to take a chance on us, especially from like a variety of different countries where maybe people aren't going to be scouting from, you know, like that. It's super frustrating to me that this is going on. And yeah, that's my like European rant, because people think Europe sucks and it's not true. It makes me mad.
Well, from one region with a dominant team that is crushing everyone to another region where another dominant team is crushing everyone. It is my Player of the Week segment to close out the show. And for my Player of the Week, it's not from North America. It's not from Europe. It's actually going to the land of the rising sun, Japan, with Absolute Jupiter's star jet player, their captain, Reita, who in another flawless tournament, Absolute Jupiter bumped every team in their way in a single elimination tournament up to the finals where it was a best of 3, not losing a single map. Reita had a 1.08 kills per round, 302 average combat score, 1.72 kill to death differential, and he was having a first blood rate of .31, which led everyone in the competition with 25 first bloods in the final 4 matches of the tournament. Wow.
Actually insane.
Yeah. Part of it is that Japan as a whole is I don't want to say far weaker, but is a less deep region than either North America or Europe. I do want to give them a lot of credit because when we talk about Europe not having, committed orgs, Japan has 20 of them. Almost every single Japanese esports organization in the country has a VALORANT team already, from DFM to Scars to Sengoku Gaming to almost every single one has picked up a team, but Absolute Jupiter is head and shoulders above everyone else. They are the former #1 Japanese Counter-Strike global offensive team who, when VALORANT was announced, they quit Counter-Strike immediately and said, we're going to VALORANT. They've gone to VALORANT. The Jupiter organization picked up the Absolute roster, combining the two to become Absolute Jupiter. And since then, they have not dropped a single map in either of their 2 Ignition Series tournament wins. They are monsters in Japan, and they also remind me of similar, like Lunatic High, back when Overwatch was coming big. I know you could talk about this, Emily, where at the beginning of Overwatch's lifespan in South Korea, one of the reasons why the game became so popular, why the esports team became so popular, because they had a team, Lunatic High, they could rally behind, where these players became kind of idols, stars that, the fans could just, latch onto because they were so dominant and they were so cool and they were presented well. Very similar situation right now with Absolute Jupiter, where they are crushing everyone, and the Absolute Jupiter brand is doing an amazing job presenting these guys. They are doing well in YouTube views, streaming views, all around. The Japanese scene is very exciting right now. They are probably the leading Asian region in terms of VALORANT esports, which I'm sure is surprising to many people who thought South Korea would be leading the charge. No, it's Japan. It's Absolute Jupiter. So Reita, Bars, all of the boys over at Absolute Junior or Absolute Jupiter with Junior as the coach, I just want to give them a kudos because I cannot wait to see these guys on an offline stage with the likes of G2, Sentinels, and the rest of the VALORANT scene when we can finally have offline tournaments.
Yeah, the amount with which Japan has embraced VALORANT is surprising to me because, again, we don't think of Japan as a typical PC culture, but it's been really great to watch. And I kind of hope that whenever we have our first South Korean tournament, that a team can, it doesn't have to be the former MVP lineup, although I know a lot of people are probably looking at them.
Probably them. It will most likely be them.
I want a team, they're far more prepared than let's be real. But I want a team to jump out and lead the charge in South Korea so that we can at least get the ball rolling there a little bit more since they've had some Vanguard PC Cafe PC.
Yeah, that feels bad.
It does. It's very feels bad, man. But yeah, I love the fact that Japan has embraced this. Completely unexpected, but awesome.
Yeah, just I want to give a shout out to Noringo, who is the top Rainbow Six team. They kind of started they were really the first FPS team from Japan that kind of caught my eye, and they kind of took over that scene, popularizing, maybe a bit of computer esports over there. I know the League of Legends scene has been rising year to year, and finally, I think VALORANT kind of hit the sweet spot between those two games with Riot backing a first-person shooter, very accessible in terms of aesthetics. And it's kind of hit with the Japanese market, and I think sky's the limit for Absolute Jupiter. These guys, I don't want to say they're a top 10 team in the world, top 5. It's from my point of view, their mechanics are quite good. Their team plays even better. They look very, very systematically coordinated, which you would expect from a team that's been playing together for a while from the Counter-Strike scene, now over to VALORANT as a 5-stack. But sky's the limit for these guys. I cannot wait until our first offline tournament. Until then, we will be, checking up on them every so often, talking about how they're destroying everyone in Japan, because right now, don't see them being stopped anytime soon.
No, I don't see another team in Japan that can compete with them. It's a very similar Similar, if not actually significantly worse than G2's lead in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
So very, very apropos highlight shout out at the end of the show.
And if you want more shout-outs and more talk about Absolute Jupiter and Sentinels and the upcoming Phase Invitational, which is coming up this week, check us out on Thursday's show, our regular ESPN Esports Valorant show, where it's me, Emily Rand, Ardo Cal, and Jacob Wolf. We sit down here at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and talk about Valorant for a good hour or two, and we catch you up on all the news and analysts and all the clips and everything. We got you covered every Thursday night. Emily, where can they find you and all the socials and everything else? Because, they're plugging ourselves here at ESPN.
I was going to say, you do this, like, I have my LPL show, and I never shout myself out. I never do any of this. So
shout out.
How to do an outro here. You can find me on Twitter at League of Emily. I keep saying I'm going to do VOD reviews on my Twitch channel, which is the same thing.
Sure.
I have not yet, but I probably will, even if it's just streaming my jungle pathing spreadsheets. I typically am an LPL specialist, but I cover League of Legends and Call of Duty specifically. I have a ton of COD interviews coming out with every single MVP candidate. So if you're interested in other FPS games, if you're a huge COD fan like I am, you can check that out as well.
Thank you. And as always, chat, the viewers out there, while some people might rank you 12th, while some people might rank you 122nd, in my heart, you will always be number one. And I will see you here next Monday night. Thank you.
Thank you.